Hey, what's up YouTube? What's going on? In this new video, what I want to talk about and share with you guys is a reminder as why it's important to perform an assessment with clients as a coach or a trainer. Now, the reason I just wanted to talk about this is because in the last day I've performed 6 assessments, 4 with people in person and then 2 online assessments, and there was a lot of things that I saw that were of concern to me, but if I didn't perform an assessment and I just kind of threw these clients into the fire, they're likely would probably hurt themselves at some point if they continued with maybe a program or just they were thrown into the fire without really seeing some of their movement restrictions. So to give you guys an example, yesterday I had one client come in for an in-person assessment and they moved pretty poorly. It seemed like they just hadn't been in the gym almost ever. Now they weren't overweight, they had a few extra pounds on them, but when they were doing a lunge pattern, when I had them doing a lunge pattern, they were really shaky and their frontal plane stability was pretty weak. So when they would step forward into a lunge, they would kind of shift side to side a little bit and they couldn't really maintain good stability. Another thing that stood out to me with the same client was that they walked with their feet pointed outwards. So they were really externally rotated at their hips. And it's things like that that are important to pick up because all of those positions are going to affect your lunge pattern, your squat pattern, step ups, if you're doing an exercise like step ups, anything along those lines, it's going to affect. And if you don't pick those up during an assessment and you just throw these individuals into the fire and you load them up, you're likely going to cause an injury at some point if you don't clean things up or stop them when you see them performing poor movement. So that was just kind of one thing that I picked up with that client yesterday. Another client yesterday, one thing I noticed was they pronated during their lunge pattern, so their feet and knees would kind of cave in a little bit, so that upon kind of looking further, they do present with flat feet. So it's little things like that that are important to pick up because, like I said, that's going to affect things like your lunge pattern, squat pattern. Those things are I need to be aware of, and also in terms of how I'm going to program exercise, I need to be very kind of specific with that individual, and each individual needs to be specific. But even going one step further, looking at my online clients now, the assessments that I do with them, I noticed that their squat patterns were not the greatest, and there was a couple flaws that I saw in terms of the hips shifting to one side. They were favoring one side when they squatted downward, so they would shift to the right a little bit. And also the knees would come forward excessively, way over the toes. So just an indication that they're quad dominant and that we need to work on a lot more posterior chain work and interior core work to help clean up that squat pattern. And the one thing that I did notice with both of them, these 2 online clients, is that as soon as I gave them a counterbalance on front and they squatted, their squat cleaned up and looked pretty good compared to what they were doing before with their arms overhead or just doing a regular squat with their hands behind their head or even with their heels elevated. So when their heels were elevated, didn't clean up their squat pattern because they already had good dorsiflexion. It's just they needed more stability. So the counterbalance kind of allowed for that, and that it confirmed to me that we need some more interior core work and also some posterior chain work to kind of clean up the squat pattern. So anyways, I know I'm kind of going off here on kind of specifics with a few assessments that I just did recently, but the whole point of this video is that you need to be performing an assessment. If you're not performing an assessment, you're just guessing when it comes to exercise prescription. And at the end of the day, that's not valuable to a client or to a person that's going on into an exercise program, because if they're just thrown into the fire, and they're not moving properly, that's how an injury is going to occur, whether it's a knee, shoulder, ankle, low back. That's how injuries occur because people do not move properly and they're not qualified to be doing certain exercises. And if you don't have the proper stability or mobility to be performing an exercise, you may not be able to get into the proper position to perform that lift. And we could use an example like the deadlift. There's a lot of things that are involved in performing the deadlift, a lot of technique involved, and you need the adequate mobility and stability and just strength to really even perform that lift. And if you can't get into that position and you're going to lift load off the floor like that and you don't move properly, that's how something like a herniated disc develops. And I know my channel, a lot of it's focused around low back injuries, specifically disc issues. That's why I just wanted to use kind of the deadlift as an example. But the assessment, that's why it needs to be done, because if you're not assessing, you're guessing. So the point of this video is, if you're a coach or trainer, you should be performing an assessment with every client and getting a detailed history and background around their fitness level and just seeing how they move. Now, everyone's assessment is going to be different, and I get not everyone's going to have the same amount of time to perform a detailed assessment, so it's going to be really specific to the individual. But as a general rule of thumb, the greater the injury history, the longer the assessment should be. And if you're running maybe boot camps or something, large group classes, you're probably not going to have as much time to perform an assessment with all those clients, but putting them through a couple maybe general ones just to kind of get a baseline to see how they move would probably be adequate enough for that kind of group and service that you're offering. But also just for, your average person out there that's looking to work with a trainer or coach, if you haven't been put through an assessment, then your trainer or coach is probably likely just throwing you into the fire. And if you're not moving well, and if you don't know you're moving well, I would suggest you find a good coach or trainer out there to kind of help you and educate you perhaps about how you move and if you're moving well and if you're doing the right things. So that's it. That's all I wanted to cover in this video. It just serves as a reminder of why an assessment is important. I hope you guys kind of understand why someone like myself performs an assessment and why an assessment should be performed. But now, if you have any questions, guys, anything about assessments or anything like that, feel free to kind of just leave a comment below and I'll be happy to answer your questions. Okay, guys, so with that being said, I'm going to wrap up this video. I wish you guys all the best and a successful and productive day, and take care.